the first question I have is basically to get from you a sense of how you would rate the American media in their coverage of the events of the attack last September. I mean, what's your assessment of how the American media has performed?
Well, let's see. Shamefully is a word that comes to mind, but that's not true in the case of, well, it depends. You know, you have to, their papers, and there's the New York Times, Washington Post, but overall the American journalism, I think, has been cowed and intimidated by this massive flag sucking, this patriotic orgy that the White House keeps whipping up. You know, if you criticize the president, it's unpatriotic and there's something wrong with you, you may be a terrorist. And I've been raving against this from the very beginning, but I don't have much of a constant national platform now because I've been working on this book, Kingdom of Fear, which is really describes what's going on over here, the Kingdom of Fear.
So in that sense, Hunter S. Thompson, there's not enough room for dissenting voices?
Well, there's plenty of room. There's just not enough people are willing to take the risk. It's just sort of a herd mentality, a lemming-like mentality. If you don't go with the flow, you're anti-American and therefore a suspect. And we've seen this before, these patriotic frenzies. And wartime, you know, they declare, it's very convenient having an undeclared war that you can call a war and impose military tribunals and wartime security. And then we got these generals telling us that this war is going to go on for a long, long time. Maybe it's not so much the generals now. The generals are a little afraid to invade Iraq, a little worried about it. But it's the civilians in the White House, this gang of thieving, just lobbyists for the military-industrial complex who are running the White House. And to be against them is to be patriotic, then hell, call me a traitor.
Do you think that most of the American media, or say most of the influential American media, has bought that patriotism line and as a result are self-censoring themselves?
There we go, self-censorship, yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah, I would say that. Now, there are always exceptions to that, but there have been damn few. Maureen Dowd, the New York Times, I'm trying to think of else. Not that many have come to mind. And you know, it's that corporate mentality of, well, what will the advertisers think? You know, in the Times against the president, therefore we won't advertise in it. That corporate kind of, we're all in this together thinking. So, yeah, the publishers have always been Republicans, and the working press usually Democratic, the smarter part of them. But not even the Democrats have been very strong on this, not strong enough to get anybody excited.
So is it the White House laying down what they think is appropriate journalism, or is it the news media outlets deciding that they have to be patriotic, that they're under some sort of undeclared duty at the moment to somehow reflect the patriotism of the American public?
Well, it goes a little deeper than that because this administration is well on the road to seizing power. Tom Daschle, the Senate Democratic leader, the other day accused Bush of trying to seize dictatorial powers. Now, that was a big breakthrough. And I'm starting to sense that the tide may be turning against the president. We have to beat this bastard one way or another. And the easiest way to do it is vote. I mean, we don't have to use terrorism to beat a little fart like that. Just voting is should be sufficient. And I have a sense that there is a kind of a flag of courage of some sort, courage to disagree with the government. And that's what this country is all about, really.
Well, historically, that's obviously hugely important for America, that notion of independence. So you're arguing at the moment we're not seeing that in the media's coverage of the whole...
The American government is the greatest enemy of freedom around the world that I can think of. And we keep waving that flag, freedom. And, yeah, these people are flag suckers.
What about the language that's being used to describe the so-called undeclared war? I mean, there have been criticisms in the mainstream press in Australia that journalists have too readily taken up the language of politicians and bureaucrats, that they have uncritically declared the war against terror without really thinking it through. What's your assessment of the situation in the States?
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're talking about Australian journalists.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's good. Congratulations, boys. There's not much of that in this country yet. You know, the New York Times, the paper of record, has made, I think, they've been pretty courageous in terms of just laying out what is going on. Yeah, reading the New York Times for the past year has been like one funeral dirge, or, you know, list one funeral after another. This over here is the most paranoid, most insecure country, well, that I've ever lived in. Or, I mean, it's the worst this country has been since I've ever seen it. And I've been covering politics for a long time, and sports.
So that's how you'd characterize the popular debate at the moment, that it's full of paranoia?
Yeah, but now on the other side, we don't have what appears to be just a bunch of half-bright Jesus freaks. But soon, if you look at it just a little bit with a different prism, this could be a military takeover. It could be called that. Yeah, if you notice all the power being centralized in the White House in Washington, with these super agencies taking over, the FBI, CIA, these super cabinet positions, this little bastard of a president, the goofy child president, I used to call him that, but goofy is way too friendly for a president who's been nothing but presiding over the looting of the Treasury and the looting of people's pension funds. He's done a lot of damage, and he's trying to. His next step, I guarantee you, is to overrule the Freedom of Information Act that is key to the survival of journalism in this country.
Do you feel like there's a restriction of media freedom, of the freedom to speak and the freedom to marshal opposition arguments at the moment? Is there a restricted space for media freedom?
Well, I think what happened, I wouldn't say it's a restricted space, but it's a dark and dangerous gray area to venture into. Several journalists have lost their jobs. Columnists, with Bill Maher on ABC. You get these tides of public protest when a journalist suggests what I'm doing now. And, yeah, they can try to fire me. Maybe they can. But some people were made an example of early on. And then they had this argument, well, you know, if you want to criticize like that, you're making fun of the victims or people who died in the disastrous crashes. I'm still not sure who did that. And I think there's a lot more to it than we have been allowed to know over here. You know, the media is not doesn't reflect world opinion or even a larger, more intelligent opinion over here. It's just this drumbeat of celebrity worship and child funerals and you know, hooded prisoners being led around Guantanamo. No, I'm very disturbed about the civil rights implications of this, and everybody should be.
So just on journalists who may have lost their jobs, are you saying that people who came out and were fearless in their critique of the government or the government's planning, government's policy, that those people were actually lost their jobs as journalists?
Well, I can think of two right come to mind, and they were right in the beginning. I haven't heard of many since, but I think Bill Maher, there was some kind of high rave after 9/11 that all these people, cowards, you know, these dirty little bastards who snuck up on us and pulled off what amounts to a perfect crime, really. No witnesses, very little cost. Talk about cost-effective. That was a hell of a strike. But I'm not sure I'd call them cowards, but that's what Bill Maher said on TV. And he said, let's see, the fact that he considered our missile attacks, our bombing attacks on unseen victims, wedding parties, etc., that was cowardly. Wacko, boy, a huge tidal wave of condemnation came down on him. And that's right, ABC, yeah.